Mr. Dermond's head was decapitated, and we do not know the whereabouts of his head. She's found a good 6 miles away down the lake. This is not some rapidly flowing river.
I wasn't going to include a cult in this episode if it was clear that they didn't have anything to do with these murders. But after days of obsessively researching this group, I believe it's far from clear.
My philosophy is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. When they hurt you, hurt them back. I think it's just a matter of time before people get the courage to start striking back.
White people are the devil. They're mischief makers, they're troublemakers, they're killers. They are disease.
It was a warm spring day at Lake Oconee when Peggy and her husband went to check on some neighbors of theirs.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Putnam County 911.
Yes, I have an emergency.
Okay.
I think I have somebody dead.
They knocked on the door multiple times. No answer. Finding the door was unlocked, they let themselves in and began calling for Russell and Shirley. They walked through every room in the over 3,000 square foot home. There was no sign of Russell or Shirley, but there was also nothing out of place and no signs of any struggle. Things did change when they walked inside the garage. A man was lying lifeless on the garage floor in a pool of blood. They would later find out that it was their good friend Russell Dermond, but at the time they couldn't be sure of who it was, as Russell had been decapitated and his head was nowhere to be found. About a week later, 5 miles from the Dermonds' home, Shirley's bloated body floated to the surface of the lake, with 2 30-pound concrete blocks tied to her ankles. The seasoned sheriff was completely baffled. Nothing was missing from the home, and he couldn't find any obvious enemies. So what happened to Russell and Shirley Dermond? When I began researching for this case, I figured it would have some level of mystery and intrigue, but honestly, I had no idea just how deep of a rabbit hole I was getting myself into. Lake Oconee is a 30-mile, 19,000-acre lake located halfway between Atlanta and Augusta, Georgia. Its shores border 4 counties in Georgia, and the Dermonds lived in Putnam County. It's a man-made lake owned by Georgia Power, created when a dam was built on the Oconee River. Lake Oconee has become a popular recreation spot for boaters and fishers, and is often buzzing during the summer weekends. The shores of Lake Oconee are a mix of secluded areas, rental lake homes, and upscale waterfront neighborhoods like Great Waters, where Russell and Shirley built their dream retirement home. Great Waters is a private, gated community built around a golf course and is one of the most exclusive communities on the lake. The Dermonds' home was located in the back of the community. Up until 2014, when the murder of Russell and Shirley Dermond occurred, there had been virtually no crime reported in this area. Russell was a World War II vet where he served in the Navy. He met his wife Shirley after the war and they married in 1950. They had 4 children, and for many years, Russell worked as an executive at a clock company before transitioning to the restaurant industry, where he owned and operated multiple Hardee's and Wendy's franchises in Georgia. They lived in the Atlanta area before selling off the franchises to their 2 sons and retiring on the shores of Lake Oconee. Oftentimes, their kids and grandkids would come to the house to spend time on the lake. They were active in the community and in their church, and everyone who came in contact with them knew them to be kind. To get an idea of the level of mystery surrounding this case, we need to look at the police response. Sometimes when diving into mysterious murder cases, the reason they seem to go unsolved is not necessarily the complexity of the case itself, but the inexperienced or lackluster police response. This case is truly a mystery of its own circumstance, meaning despite an incredibly thorough and driven investigation involving multiple agencies and the latest investigative technologies, it's still a mystery. The sheriff in charge of this investigation, FBI Academy-trained Sheriff Sills, has been the elected sheriff in Putnam County for 28 years. At the time of the Dermond murders, he had solved every single murder case he was involved with as sheriff and had sent 5 murderers to death row. As soon as he got word of the murders, he launched a full-scale investigation and search.
Within a matter of 2 hours, a patrol boat were in the water and we drove the vicinity of this home. Yesterday, the Department of Natural Resources came with the most advanced sonar equipment they have. Our cadaver dogs had searched the immediate vicinity, wooded area around the home. We continue going from door to door. We have violent crime, something that I'm in command of. We throw all of our resources at it, assisted by the FBI, Jones County Sheriff's Office, Morgan County Sheriff's Office.
When Russell's body was found, Sheriff Sills operated under the assumption that Shirley was still alive and in grave danger.
We still do not know the whereabouts of Shirley Dermond. We need to assume, or at least pray, that Miss Dermond is still alive.
One of the things I found kind of unique about Sheriff Sills is his relative transparency when it came to the details of this case, as well as a willingness and openness to talk with anyone in hopes that more coverage could stir up the community and get people talking. We stopped by the sheriff department to get a quick shot of the front of the building, and long story short, a few minutes later, we were sitting down and talking with Sheriff Sills.
I'm ashamed that it's been 8 years. I'm ashamed that we've not been able to crack this case. But I've released as much as I can in hopes that someone will come forward and give us a name.
Digital evidence always plays a big role in these investigations. Have you ever Googled yourself and were shocked to see your personal information exposed on one of those public listing sites? There is tons of digital information out there online about pretty much everyone. Trust me, I know this fact better than most because oftentimes I'm the one scouring the internet to try to find information on people. I want to thank Aura for sponsoring today's video. I remember using these resources that I had developed to look into myself and see what was out there. I was shocked at just how much personal information there was about me online. Addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, information on people I was related to or close to. There was even an email address listed for a girl I dated in high school, and I'm currently 35 years old. All of this information is available to companies called data brokers who use your personal information as their product and sell it to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, and anyone else that wants to learn more about you. Aura will identify the data brokers that are exposing your information online and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They even opt you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T revealed that over 73 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. They recommend those affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Aura does all of this for me, and I don't have to download several different apps just because a company couldn't keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in the AT&T data breach, I wouldn't really worry because Aura is always on, always doing the hard work of keeping me safe online. I really value my privacy and I value yours. You can use my link, aura.com/EricAllen, to try 2 weeks completely free and see how many data brokers are sharing your information. The link is in the description below. Again, that's aura.com/EricAllen to start protecting your information online. Thanks Aura for sponsoring this video. Russell was found in a shirt and boxers with his bathrobe bunched up in a pool of blood underneath his body. There were defensive wounds found on the body showing that a struggle had occurred. Russell's hands were bruised and there was a large gash on his left finger running down to his palm. The medical examiner stated that Russell was already deceased at the time of his decapitation. On Friday, May 16th, around 2:30 p.m., the sheriff's office received another phone call.
We received a call here at the sheriff's office from some fishermen and that they had spotted what they thought to be a body.
A patrol boat was dispatched, and upon extraction of the body, it was determined to be 87-year-old Shirley Dermond. Despite being weighed down by two 30-pound concrete blocks, it had floated to the surface due to gases building up in the body from decomposition. I asked Sheriff Sills about the area that Shirley was found in, and he explained that when the river was dammed and the area was flooded, they left a few sections of what they call standing timber. Essentially, in these specific areas, you can be in about 50 feet of water and see the tops of trees just below or sticking out right above the surface. He explained that I needed to be pretty careful on my boat when I was in that area.
You trim it up as high as you can get it. And go slow and watch for. That's what happened to Ms. Dermond's body. She came up and floated over and caught on the top of a tree. Mm-hmm. There were two cap blocks in a mesh bag. The cord kind of wrapped around the tree. And the top of the tree was maybe just 3 inches or 4 inches beneath the surface. You could see it if you were going slow.
Her skull was fractured and 2 lacerations were found on her head. It's believed that she was killed by blunt force trauma before being discarded in the lake.
She's found a good 6 miles away down the lake. This is not some rapidly flowing river. All of the things about current don't apply. We talked to hydrologists. She pretty much came up where she went down.
The area that she was recovered from is undeveloped and can only be accessed by boat. So while we don't necessarily know if the killers used a boat to get to the Dermonds' home, we do know they used a boat to discard of Shirley's body. Due to some evidence that's not yet released by the police, Sheriff Sills says he can be sure that up until at least 4:30 p.m. on Friday, May 2nd, the Dermonds were still alive. The party that they were supposed to attend and missed was at 4 p.m. the next day. During that time frame, no one in the area reported seeing anything strange or out of place. No suspicious vehicles or boats in the area. This one was tough. Usually at this point, I'd go through the various theories as to what happened, but this crime has so little evidence that theories are hard to come by, and the vague theories that are out there seem to all have their holes. Originally, I thought the end of this episode would be relatively simple. I don't know if I've ever been more wrong. While sitting down with Sheriff Sills, he made an offhand comment about a cult that used to be in the area a long time ago.
We had a cult here that was probably one of the biggest child molestation cases in the history of America that we made.
Wow.
That all, and that for many years, that's all anybody wanted to talk about. And that's been so long now, most people have forgotten about that case. But
in the conversation, it didn't seem like he thought it had anything to do with these murders. So I didn't really ask any questions and we moved on. It wasn't until the next day that I said, hey, let's look into that cult that Sheriff Sills mentioned, not thinking that anything would come of it, just that it'd be some interesting conversation for the ride home. I wasn't going to include a cult in this episode if it was clear that they didn't have anything to do with these murders. But after days of obsessively researching this group, I believe it's far from clear. The Nuwaubian Nation was founded by a man who called himself Malachi Z. York. His religion would morph over time, but included concepts from Islam, Judaism, Christianity, New Age, UFO religion, and ancient Egyptian religious themes. The group first developed in New York, but in 1993, a few years before the Dermonds moved to the area, they relocated to Putnam County, Georgia, near Lake Oconee. They built an elaborate and intricate ancient Egyptian-themed compound named Tama-Re that included a nightclub and multiple pyramids, one of which would play ritualistic soundscapes from the speaker mounted at the crest. The group was considered eccentric and odd, but at first they were considered generally safe.
I have no information to indicate that they are dangerous.
And here's a quote from Dorothy Adams, who was Putnam County's attorney at the time. This is the South. We're used to kooks. Heck, we're proud of our kooks. Every family has them, so we took a live and let live attitude. Though that sentiment would change over the years as the locals got to know the group a bit better.
White people are the devil. They say the Nuwaubians are not racist. Bullcrap. I am. They ain't no good at the core. They're mischief makers. They're troublemakers. They're killers. They are disease.
We have breaking news out of Putnam County. That's where federal agents are serving search warrants at the Nuwaubian compound.
We're counting at least 30 different police cars of various...
The officers are all walking around with shotguns drawn.
U.S. government helicopters, at least 2 that I can see at this point.
Nuwaubian leader Dwight York is in federal court on the nation's largest prosecution of a single defendant in a child molestation case.
In 2002, Malachi was arrested for child molestation and sentenced to 135 years in prison, where he remains to this day. Although a Waco-level shootout was feared, he was taken into custody peacefully.
Mr. York, you understand you're charged with 40 counts of aggravated child molestation, that you could receive a maximum sentence of 30 years in confinement. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Okay, now that we know a bit about the Nuwaubians, what could lead us to believe they might have been involved in the decapitation of Russell and the murder of Shirley Dermond? As I began researching, I found some light connections, like the fact that ancient Egyptians believed decapitation, more specifically post-mortem decapitation of your physical body, was believed to negatively affect your spiritual self in the afterlife. Next, I found an interesting relationship between Malachi and the leader of a similar cult in the bordering state of Florida, who he would often criticize and mock to the amusement of his followers. Yahweh ben Yahweh was the leader of the nation of Yahweh, and I honestly think that Malachi's criticism of him was rooted in jealousy. Malachi followed a very similar path as ben Yahweh. Here's where things get interesting. In 1992, Yahweh ben Yahweh was convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder. He had been ordering his most radical followers, known as death angels, to kill, mutilate, and in one case decapitate what he described as black blasphemers and white devils. There seemed to be similarity after similarity between Yahweh ben Yahweh and Malachi Z. York, and I began to wonder if beheading could be one of them. It turns out my hunch was right. As I kept digging, I came across a story from when Malachi and his group was in New York. Malachi's most radical followers at the time were called the Mujahid, or Sword of Islam. The head of the Mujahid and Malachi's security team, Roy Savage, was charged and convicted with the murder and decapitation of a woman after a suitcase was discovered with only her torso inside. Her head, arms, and legs had been removed. Since Malachi's arrest, the cult has dwindled in size some, but still has plenty of very active followers who don't believe that Malachi was guilty. To the remaining Nuwaubians, Sheriff Sills is seen as enemy number one, essentially Malachi's arch nemesis.
The topic for this video is none other than Putnam County's own local good old boy, the unillustrious Sheriff Howard Richard Sills. Where do I begin? Harasser, instigator, troublemaker, law abuser, law bender, lawbreaker, liar, shifty, arrogant, racist, conniving, self-deluded, paranoid, egotistical. These are a few words that will come to the mind of any Nuwaubian who remembers all of the evil deeds he committed towards the Nuwaubians leading up to the illegal arrest of Dr. York.
In Cincinnati, do you think the racist behavior of the people in Putnam County, Howard Sills and all his cahoots, do you think that kind of thing could erupt in Eatonton?
Yeah, I do think it can erupt in Eatonton. I think Howard Sills would like that because he's a nobody. He's on his way out. And he knows that. He'd like to make sure that everything is destroyed when he falls. You follow? And I think his tactic is, he has a very unique tactic. He's scared. So what he does is he keeps mentioning my name, or he keeps mentioning the Nuwaubians every place he goes, so in case something happens to him, he'll have somebody to blame it on.
Next, I went looking for videos of Sheriff Sills talking about the Nuwaubians. There's only a couple on YouTube, and this particular video is by far the most comprehensive and popular video. It caught my eye as it had tons of angry comments from members of the Nuwaubian nation, as they believed that it was full of lies and defamations of their leader.
York is believed to have fathered 200 or more children and abandoned essentially all of them. He was convicted of molesting dozens of the children of his most loyal followers. He began assaulting a few of his victims when they were 4 or 5 years old. And all the while, York was laughing at the people who devoted themselves to him, the people who worshipped him.
And she was only 7 years old when York started molesting her.
Our first inkling of that was in September of 1998, when a local lady who worked in the medical profession came to me and said, "Sheriff, I want you to know that a lot of those girls out there at the York place are having children. They seem awfully young to me."
They are still active. They're out there. They're pretty pathetic as far as I can see.
I'll be honest, my heart started beating a bit faster when I saw the date that it was posted. April 25th, 2014. Just 7 days before the murders of Russell and Shirley Dermond. I decided to put the comments in order of date so that I could scroll back to the beginning and read the comments made around the time of the Dermond murders. This commenter left 3 pretty long comments, but a few lines in particular really stuck out to me. Keep in mind, I've spent days obsessively looking for any Nuwaubian mentioning beheadings or decapitations or cutting heads off, and I hadn't found anything until this moment. You mother effers all are going to pay for what you are doing. Please know this, demons. We are coming for you all. Nowhere to run to, 6 ether demons, nowhere to hide. The father and mothers of lies, and we shall continue to cut the heads off these serpents. Could this just be a coincidence? Of course it could. But let me put this another way. The only instance I could find of the Putnam County, Georgia Nuwaubian cult talking about cutting heads off was essentially the same week someone had their head cut off in Putnam County, Georgia. The Nuwaubian Nation is still active to this day. Malachi is in prison, so obviously he could not have carried out the act himself, but I don't think that's how he would have done it anyway. What if Malachi ordered the murders of a few white devils as revenge for his incarceration? Or what if a devout follower took actions into their own hands? I would guess at the time of the Dermond murders, tensions were high in the Nuwaubian Nation, as not only had the controversial video just been released, but Malachi's 12-year anniversary arrest was coming up on the 8th of May. Additionally, if we look at the Dermonds specifically, they owned 19 fast food franchises, so at one time they had hundreds of employees under them.
And the way to hit them is stop working for them and start working for self and kind. Start doing things, start building business from the inside out. Stop giving yourself to them as slaves and then expecting them to treat you other than a slave. Right. If you want to be treated like a slave, keep working for them. My philosophy is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I'm not into that turn the other cheek. I may be a Christian, but I don't believe in turning the other cheek. I think it's just a matter of time before people get the courage to start striking back. But they don't want you hurting them. And I think it's time for black people to start realizing that when they hurt you, hurt them back.
I was watching a documentary series about why the Nuwaubian Nation believes Malachi is innocent and read this comment about Malachi being from Teaneck, New Jersey. I knew he started his first group in New York and was born in Massachusetts, but I didn't realize that from age 12, he grew up in New Jersey. New Jersey also happens to be where the Dermonds are from, Hackensack to be more specific. I remember thinking there's probably nothing there, but let me just check and see how close their towns were from each other. Teaneck was 1.5 miles from Hackensack, and we'll cover this in part 2, but I did discover that they lived in the area at the same time. Editing, Eric here up in the mountains of North Georgia. Anyways, long story short, this video was originally uploaded a couple years ago into 2 parts and was taken down shortly after. I'm finally getting around to re-uploading it, and I'm just uploading those 2 parts as one video. So that's why you might hear me say part 1 and part 2 in this video a few times. Anyways, here's the last of part 1 going into part 2. When you spend days diving down rabbit holes, you can get kind of obsessed and into a weird headspace. I began to wonder if I was just picking out little details to fit a certain narrative that I wanted to present to you, the audience. That's when I decided to present this whole theory to someone who knows the Dermond case and the Nuwaubian case better than anyone else. I could be making a much bigger deal out of this whole theory than I should. At this moment, I'm not exactly sure what the connection is between the Dermonds and Malachi Z. York, but I am determined to find out.
I'll be honest with you, there's certain aspects of Russell Dermond's life I don't know.
Long story short, I found out that there were actually 3 Russell Dermonds living in this area at the time.
Weapons, Glock 90mm, sawed-off shotguns.
And I pulled that little North American out and I cocked it. And I said, but I'm going to send one of you to hell today.
7 years later, Dad Russell Dermond was charged with misconduct with a woman in Fair Lawn, New Jersey.
Y'all just don't understand how f***ed up things are.
At this moment, I'm not exactly sure what the connection is between the Dermonds and Malachi Z. York, but I am determined to find out.
The only thing that you said there that interests me is the proximity of that little town, and if they knew each other some way many years ago. When you see ritualistic crime, they want it known that that's what it was.
Yeah.
People ask, was the body positioned some sort of way or something like that to indicate some sort of ritualistic association with the murder? It ain't there.
Yeah.
Or they want it known, like if they, kill me, and then that's going to be big news.
Yeah.
You kill me. I'm easy to kill. I mean, there could be somebody right out there on the edge of those pine trees with a rifle when I walk out to the car.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yeah. But is it likely? I don't think so. Okay? I just don't.
Yeah.
Not unless they knew each other or something. Now, if they knew each other, that'd put a different light on it.
Well, I did more digging and I was able to potentially uncover the reason why this murder has been so perplexing and seemingly random. The wrong Russell Dermond might have been killed. This episode will use my second interview with Sheriff Sills, an interview I did with a former member of the Nuwaubian Nation, and new information I found when researching for this episode to see if that theory holds any weight. There's a history of violence in the Nuwaubian Nation, one that even included a decapitation in the 80s when they were located in New York. Chuck Morgan was a member of the Nuwaubian Nation from 1989 until 2011. I spoke with him as well as Sheriff Sills about the Nuwaubian Nation and violence. I don't know if that was really kind of behind the scenes stuff that he kind of kept to the side, or was there kind of a violent sentiment in the cult at all?
I don't see it as being the cult as a whole. However, there were individuals that moved in. In Baltimore, there were some individuals that were robbing Jewish establishments. The media started getting on it, and they referred to them as the shotgun bandits. And no one knew who they were. At nighttime, they wear all black, put ski masks on, hoods with high-powered weapons, Glock 9mm, sawed-off shotguns, and rob people. One of the guys was telling me all about it, what they do, and their justification was, you got to do anything for the mission. In New York, they had this big conflict with the Sunni Muslims. So there were conflicts, there were fightings on the street, there were stabbings. You know, York, it got so bad that York formed his own military force within the organization called the, at that time referred to him as the Swords of Islam. They were the people who did a lot of the violent acts for York. So there was always that undertone of violence that was there. Again, that was always individuals who, from what I saw, took it upon themselves to do certain things for the quote.
It wasn't
mission.
ever preached from the pulpit.
No.
Dumbass me one day. Taylor was 10. My son was 10. He wanted to go to the World of Coca-Cola. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't pay attention to anybody following me that day. I just didn't. Yeah. And the only gun I had on me, a North American Arms 22 Magnum. This little stainless steel gun. I had that in my pocket. That's all I had. Yeah. We went, and we still had several hours to spare. And it used to be down by the entrance to Underground Atlanta. So we go over to Underground. They used to have these old cars parked out on the streets, and I was bent over just looking at the tire and the wheel of the car. And when I raised up, I had 30 or 40 of those bitches around me.
No.
Yeah, I'm not exaggerating, to the point where people were looking to see, they were completely surrounded me. Janet came out, Taylor was still young enough to hold her hand, stuff like that, you know. Yeah. Came out of the store, and I did like this. And she knew to get the hell, she got him, and she started down the street. Yeah. And one of them said, "You enjoying your life today?" And I said, "You got the advantage, boys. Y'all got me." I said, "I'm getting ready to walk through you." And I saw Janet had made it to the out of sight. Yeah. And I said, "You got the advantage. You can kill me." And I pulled that little North American out and I cocked it. I didn't point it, but I cocked it. I said, "But I'm going to send one of you to hell today with me." Yeah, yeah. And I said, "So whoever wants to go to hell first, grab hold." And when I did that, I just walked. I never pointed them at them. I just walked right through them, and I walked out. And that was the only time I was ever scared of them at all.
So maybe picking on the defenseless was much more easier than fighting force with force.
That makes sense. If any angry Nuwaubians are watching this, I am highly on. Just want to let you guys know. These interviews really did help give me context into the Nuwaubian Nation, and from here on out, I do feel it's more fair to say a member of the Nuwaubian Nation may have committed this crime, as opposed to saying the Nuwaubian Nation did. The second piece of evidence that I found was the timing of the murders in relation to this video and a comment made on it about beheading. I couldn't find any more information on this, but I did a little research on the commenter and I sent that information to Sheriff Sills. Lastly was some really interesting information I found out about Malachi York and the Dermonds living in neighboring towns in New Jersey at the same time, years before they lived in Putnam County, Georgia. I want to share the journey of discovering the Dermond and York connection, as I didn't really go over it in my last video, and it's going to offer a really interesting insight into how tricky it can be investigating these cases, as well as be a springboard for another theory that I'll go over later in this video about why the Dermond murders might be such a perplexing mystery. It all started when I stumbled across an article saying that Malachi York grew up in New Jersey. I knew that Malachi lived in New York before moving to Georgia, but didn't realize that he had actually grown up in Teaneck, New Jersey. New Jersey is also where the Dermonds are from, Hackensack to be more specific. Hackensack and Teaneck literally border each other. I had to keep digging. I found this newspaper clip showing the address for Russell Dermond at 271 Williams Avenue. They lived there in the late 50s and 60s and maybe longer. Then I found this article listing Malachi's address as 245 Coolidge Avenue. He moved there in 1957, meaning that he was there at the same time that Russell and Shirley were. I typed in Malachi's address to see how close they were, and my heart pretty much fell out of my chest when I saw that they lived half a mile from each other. I thought to myself, there's just no way that this is a coincidence. There has to be a connection somehow. But this is where you have to be really, really careful and make sure that you do the research to present accurate information. There's a few things to unpack here. First off, I later realized that there are two 245 Coolidge Avenues less than 4 miles apart, one in Hackensack and one in Teaneck. Malachi lived at the one in Teaneck. I assumed it would bring me to his address when I typed it in maps because I just never considered that there would be two the exact same street addresses so close. So the Dermonds and Malachi didn't live half a mile apart, but still pretty close at just 4 miles. But next I kept seeing inconsistencies with news articles that would mention Russell Dermond. Inconsistencies regarding his age, when he was married, etc. Long story short, I found out that there were actually 3 Russell Dermonds living in this area at the time. There was Russell C. Dermond, born in the early 1900s, who we're going to call Dad Russell Dermond. His son, Russell J. Dermond, who is the one who was decapitated in Putnam County, Georgia, born in 1925, who we're going to call son Russell Dermond, and a third, also Russell C. Dermond, born in 1936, who we're going to call Mystery Russell Dermond, as for most of my time researching, I had no idea how he was connected to the other two. We will get into that later. Mystery Russell Dermond was actually the one who lived at the 271 Williams Avenue address. He was somewhat of a local celebrity as he competed on the U.S. Olympic team in 1956 and 1960. For example, in 1956, just a few months before Malachi moved to the area, the mayor declared a day in December as Russell Dermond Day. The papers also confused both younger Russell Dermonds, as I found multiple instances of them talking about the mystery Russell C. Dermond, the Olympian, but referring to him as Russell J. Dermond, which is the son Russell Dermond's name. I did find the real address for son Russell Dermond at the time, and he lived pretty much the same distance from Malachi as the other one. So, long story short, they didn't live half a mile from each other, but York did live within about 4 miles of 2 Russell Dermonds while he was living in New Jersey. Then again, years later, lived a few miles from a Russell Dermond in Putnam County, Georgia. I just had to keep digging, and I did find a few more interesting things back in New Jersey. When I continued to dive down the Russell Dermond rabbit hole, I was shocked to potentially find the connection between Mystery Russell Dermond and the other two. Dad Russell Dermond had separated from his wife Margaret in 1929 when son Russell Dermond was only 4. 7 years later, Dad Russell Dermond was charged with misconduct with a woman in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, for an incident occurring on March 28, 1936. It doesn't say what the misconduct was, but I think we can speculate. That's when I remembered that Mystery Russell Dermond was born that same year, 1936. I quickly did the math, and 9 months after March 28, 1936, would be the very end of December 1936. Looking up Mystery Russell Dermond's exact birthday, I discovered that he was born on December 31st, 1936, in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, 9 months after Dad Russell Dermond's misconduct with a Fair Lawn, New Jersey woman. I think Mystery Russell Dermond is also the son of Dad Russell Dermond, but with a different mother. Mr. and Mrs. Adolph Springle were listed as Mystery Russell Dermond's parents in multiple articles, leading me to believe that they adopted him at some point. I found the addresses during these times to be really interesting as well. In the 50s and 60s, the Dermonds lived across the river from the York house. But in the 30s and 40s, they actually lived on the other side of the river, much closer to York's family house. I found 2 addresses, one for when son Russell Dermond lived with his aunt and mom after they had left his dad at 403 Leonia Avenue, 1.8 miles from the York house, and the other for Dad Russell Dermond and presumably son Russell Dermond before his parents separated at 24 Westervelt Place, less than 1 mile from the York house. And this time I double and triple checked everything. These addresses are accurate. So could I find evidence that Malachi York or anyone in his family interacted with or had any type of relationship with one of the Russell Dermonds? No, I just couldn't. But it really wouldn't be hard to imagine that their families crossed paths or that they knew each other at some point. Even Sheriff Sills had a difficult time finding info on his early life, as well as finding information about the Dermonds. So they did live there at the same time, too. So
yeah, I'd have to go back. Look, I'll be honest with you, there's certain aspects of Russell Dermond's life I don't know. There are no records at all of U.S. time, nor its precursors. They don't exist.
There's no records of what? U.S.
No business records of the company he worked for. They just simply don't exist.
I was wondering because I couldn't find.
Well, you're not going to find.
I was looking. I was like, what? Clock company? Sheriff Sills went on to talk about how frustrating it was to dive into the past of Russell Dermond, or really anyone else that he investigates, as oftentimes other agencies just don't keep records.
Y'all just don't understand how up things are.
Yeah.
People, these police agencies nowadays throw away their fucking records after 10 years and shit. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, and I guess there's no way to get records of like all the employees that work in the franchises.
No, they're just gone.
Yeah.
No, and again, everywhere they had a franchise, I called the police department, Union City, Jonesboro, all these little suburbs of Atlanta, and none of them, not a single fucking one of them, have any records from them. None. Yeah. And I run into this every day. I'll call Teaneck and Hackensack, but I'll do it. But I'm not optimistic. But
Malachi York spent his time getting in trouble when he was in New Jersey, but the records just don't give us much information. Dwight was arrested or charged twice when he was 18. 2 separate occasions, one for burglary and one for statutory rape.
I've got those records.
Do you? Is that something?
Well, let me say this. No, I've got the fact that he did it.
Okay, yeah.
No, I have no idea who raped her.
Okay, yeah.
No, not a clue.
Because I was like, I could file a FOIA, but let me just ask Sheriff Sills if it's even worth it.
Not there. It's not there. No, just get rid of it as quick as you can. No, nobody wants to. Nobody wants to work.
While I got as far as I could looking into the Nuwaubian Nation theory, there was another theory that really started to make me think. In light of the info I found about multiple Russell Dermonds, could this murder be an instance of mistaken identity? What if the killers were after Russell C. Dermond, but killed Russell J. Dermond instead? This would explain why the police couldn't find any motive for the killing. There really wasn't one to kill Russell J. Dermond because that's not who they were really after. Maybe they were after Russell C. Dermond. Do I have any tangible evidence to support this theory? I don't, but outside of it explaining why this case is so mysterious, I also saw that Russell C. Dermond passed away almost exactly 1 year later, on May 9th, 2015. I don't know if the early May date is of significance, but maybe the killers realized they had the wrong one and corrected their mistake about a year later. All I could find on Russell C. Dermond's death was that he died, quote, suddenly, which could be something as simple as a car accident, but could also mean something more nefarious. This second video took forever to make. Not because what you see in the video was incredibly hard to create, but I found myself wanting so badly to solve this case. I kept feeling like I was right on the cusp of finding some bombshell piece of information that would open this case wide open, and one never came. I kept digging and digging and digging, but I could only uncover so much. At the end of the day, I don't know what happened to Russell and Shirley Dermond, but somebody does. There's still so much mystery surrounding this case, and I think it's important to keep all possibilities open. If you know anything about who may have done this, I'm asking you to reach out to the police, or even me if that makes you more comfortable. This case went a very different direction than I originally thought it would go. I know it got a little wacky, involving ancient Egyptian alien cults and such, but I don't want to lose the humanity of this case or get distracted from what it is really all about. Russell and Shirley Dermond were peacefully living out the last moments of their lives. They had been married almost 70 years and were enjoying the fruits of their hard work, watching their kids raise kids and savoring the last moments they had on Earth. I know there can be a temptation to think, well, they were near death anyway, so is it really that sad? But I really don't see it that way. Think about how precious time will be towards the end of your life. Knowing you have a limited amount of something makes it that much more valuable and precious to you. Their last years were taken from them. It's nothing short of a genuine tragedy. If you enjoyed this video, I would genuinely be honored if you subscribed. Love you guys. See y'all in the next one.